Sure there's no back entrances into this place?
Hey, there are no other entrances. Trust me. If there was a back entrance, I would have used it. I don't want to injure anyone who's innocent or not involved. Instead of going in, just to smoke them out.
Somebody detain this guy! Don't shoot!
The film opens with a beekeeper named Adam removing a beehive from his employer's shed. His employer, Mrs. Parker, takes good care of Adam and invites him for supper when he's done plucking the beehive. While Mrs. Parker goes back inside, Adam moves the bees to the synthetic hives he's built in Mrs. Parker's fields. Inside, Mrs. Parker's laptop screen gets jammed with an unusual pop-up warning sign along with the mentioned number to fix the problem. When she dials the number, a scammer named Boyd connects with her, trapping her in a web of lies and hacking her bank account, which contains $2 million worth of charity money. Scenes cut straight to the nighttime, where Adam is seen bringing a jar of honey for Mrs. Parker. When no one answers the door, he becomes suspicious and sneaks in with a knife. Unfortunately, Mrs. Parker's daughter and an FBI agent, Verona, accuses him of murdering her mother and has him under the FBI's custody. Her fellow agents try to convince her that her mother has committed suicide, but she points her fingers at Adam and prompts them to question him. Upon questioning, Adam reveals that he's Mrs. Parker's tenant, who lives in her barn. He had come to give Mrs. Parker the honey he extracted from a beehive in her shed. Hearing this, Verona doubts herself and takes a look around. She finds the bee houses in the fields and her mother's charity money gone from her laptop, which has her convinced something else is going on. That night, Verona visits Adam in his barn and apologizes to him for the accusation, but he admits he didn't take offense in that. The next morning, she invites him for tea and asks if he knew her mother was being scammed by an online fraudulent company. He tells her the truth about being unaware of the scam and finds out about the company details from her. He immediately calls an organization called the Beekeepers, from where he's now retired, and asks them to help him locate the company he's after. The woman on the phone takes some time and calls Adam back to tell him she's tracked the company down, which has spread out its network all over the world. Adam drives his Ford truck straight to the company's headquarters and takes out 2 canisters filled with petrol. 2 workers try to stop him outside, so he knocks them out before they reach for them. He then storms in, asks the receptionist to get other working offices to evacuate the building, and infiltrates the call center, where he has to viciously beat up a man to get everyone's attention. Boyd also shows up with security. He puts up a fight against his security and begins pouring the petrol all over the place. Furthermore, he rigs the place with bombs and walks out of there. Boyd also makes a run for his life, after which the bombs explode and burn the building to the ground. Outside, Boyd calls his head, Derek, to report what just happened. Derek's head blows with the news and decides to seek help from his tech firm's head security, Wallace, who's also the former director of the CIA. He keeps Wallace in the shadow and asks him if he would help his friend, whose place was burned to the ground by a hater. Wallace strictly asks him not to involve him in such shady things. Derek's still burning with rage, so he asks Boyd, whose real name is Mickey, to find the last people he's dealt with to find out their man and have him killed immediately. On the other hand, Verona's colleague, Agent Matt, calls her and requires her presence at the explosion site. There, he tells her the people that were operating in the call center were all scammers, so Verona asks him to identify all of them. Mickey eventually drives by Mrs. Parker's home and spots Adam leaving in his truck. At first, they shoot his bee houses in the field to exact revenge on him and enter the barn he works in. Adam hides in the shadows and takes them down one by one. During the fight, he saws off Mickey's fingers, but he gets away. Back on the crime scene, Verona lets out personal anger while talking to one of the scammers, so Matt pulls her away and brings her outside to identify bodies. There, he brings to her attention a possibility of Adam being behind the explosion to avenge Verona's mother. On the contrary, Mickey is seen running off in his car and trying to stop the bleeding. He calls Derek, who's currently getting a relaxation treatment. As he rants about what Adam has done to them, Adam shows up in his truck and corners Mickey. He ties Mickey to his truck and drives it off the bridge. Mickey drowns in the water, along with the car. Now Adam speaks to Derek through Mickey's phone and threatens that he's coming for him. Derek becomes petrified and consults Wallace once again. When Wallace hears their opponent has wiped all his men in one go, he becomes intrigued by the case, confessing he's never encountered such a volatile person in his entire career in the CIA. He agrees to help him, but considers calling Derek's mother first for the heads up. Meanwhile, Matt breaks down to Verona that her mother's beekeeper is a ghost, who has no records other than a birth certificate. Back in the firm, Wallace gives Derek's mother a call. She promises him a position in the firm's board committee if he manages to protect Derek from what's coming ahead of him. He immediately calls an acquaintance named Janet from the CIA and shares that he might have found a beekeeper. Their plotting against Adam reveals that the Beekeepers are a clandestine organization that they've anticipated their entire careers. Meanwhile, Verona and Matt discover Mickey's body from under the water. Sometime later, Janet calls Wallace to assure him that the beekeeper they're after is retired, and the current beekeeper has promised to look over the situation. On the contrary, the Beekeepers' organization gets a bounty hit on Adam. They send a female assassin to kill him. She runs over his truck at a gas station and ambushes him. When her gun is of no use, she turns to a giant machine gun strapped at the back of her car. Adam strikes her head with a jar of honey and sets her on fire. Before leaving, he chops off her finger and sets the station on fire too. Janet breaks the news to Wallace that the Beekeepers have announced they will remain neutral on the matter, which makes Wallace lose his temper. The next day, Verona and Matt inquire at the torched gas station, where they find a guide on beekeeping in Adam's truck. Somewhere else, Wallace joins his thugs to prepare them on how to catch a beekeeper, such as Adam. That night, Adam infiltrates one of the Beekeepers' hideouts and uses their technology to find all the companies linked with the one that scammed Mrs. Parker. Back in the FBI headquarters, Verona has a meeting with the deputy director and briefs him on how the recent explosions are connected. She also sheds light on what Adam is up to and requests a task force to secure the company's second headquarters. In the next scene, we see the second scammer leading the call center and hyping up his employees. The federal task force reaches outside that building in gear and marches in, only to find private security with a permission letter signed by the governor. The head of the private security misbehaves with the feds and sends them out. As they decide to set a perimeter inside, the private security asks the scammer to evacuate the call center to avoid a bigger threat. He takes this personally and decides to call Derek. Back outside, Adam openly introduces himself to the feds in the front because there isn't a back exit. The feds attempt to detain him, but he ends up knocking all of them to the ground. Subsequently, the careless Derek gets on a call with the private security and finds out Wallace has appointed them. He belittles the head of private security and orders him to do his job securing the place while it stays active to make millions. Simultaneously, Adam comes up front and gives the employees a chance to leave. This creates commotion and grabs the security's attention. They open fire at Adam, but he uses an employee as a human shield to run away. He secretly takes out everyone one by one and catches the scammer. He tortures him into getting his employer's whereabouts and also mentions Mrs. Parker, who was driven to commit suicide after they had scammed her. Unfortunately, Verona shows up there with Matt and points her weapon at Adam. He quickly lets her know that these are the people behind her mother's death and runs away from there. When Wallace finds out about the seriousness of the situation, he forces Derek to involve his mother now that his place is seized by the feds. Derek calls his mother, who agrees to look after the situation. When she meets with political figures from other countries, they refer to her as the President of the USA. In the next scene, Verona has another live meeting with the deputy director after gathering new intel. She blows the cover of Derek, who uses advanced data mining software to scam vulnerable people with money, which is why Adam is after him. The deputy director offers as many task forces as required and asks to capture Adam. Now we see the White House infested with special service agents teamed up with Verona and her SWAT team. Wallace has brought a deadly acquaintance, who assures the safety of everyone in his presence. The agents check every vehicle passing through. As they're checking a truck, Adam spawns out of the gutter hatch underneath the truck. When an agent looks underneath the truck, Adam viciously attacks him and puts on his uniform to disguise himself. While Derek's mother comforts him during an exclusive party she's arranged, Adam activates a bomb underneath another vehicle and finds a suitable place to change into his signature tuxedo. Inside, the deputy director sits down with Derek and his mother to hold him accountable for the fraudulent companies he's running. Meanwhile, Adam infiltrates the party and makes eye contact with Verona, who continues chasing him with her men. After ensuing chaos among the invited friends, Wallace's acquaintance gets Adam under his gunpoint. He surrenders, but simultaneously detonates the bomb he had placed under a car. This further causes mayhem, allowing Adam to escape. Meanwhile, Derek confesses to his scams and pins the blame on his mother, claiming that he did everything to help out his mother. She contradicts his claims and threatens him to take the Beekeeper's side, as well as revealing his acts to the entire nation. Outside, Adam kills anyone in his way and walks upstairs, where Derek and his mother are. Outside their room, he plants a bomb, during which Wallace tries to manipulate him into backing off, but it doesn't stop Adam. Inside, Derek shoots the deputy and threatens his mother, so Adam detonates the bomb to barge in. Derek hides behind his mother, while simultaneously Verona shows up, pointing her gun at Adam. That's when he asks her if she works for the law or justice. Derek decides to shoot his mother, but Adam shoots him before and crashes out of the window. Verona has him in her radar but chooses to let him go. He dodges the SWAT team and puts on his scuba diving gear to vanish under the ocean like a ghost.